Thank you, everybody. So I have something on the order of 40 to 50 slides. I got carried away, but I'm going to keep a good pace. So I think we can get through them all without dragging late into the night, and hopefully even have time at the end for questions. And I think we should hold our questions till the end. You will probably have a lot of questions, because this is a lot of new information coming out of Venezuela, which probably most, if not all of you, have not been exposed to yet. So this is a learning experience. It certainly was for me going there. I had no idea what was going on there, and it was just remarkable. So with that, let's get started. Okay, so these are my topics in general. So first I'll do a brief background on Venezuela. Then I'll talk about the U.S. government sanctions and go a little bit into the elections and coups d'etats there. Kevin Zeese, that was the name of our brigade. Kevin Zeese, an activist from Washington, D.C. And then some snapshots, if you will, of some of the experiences that we had there. And then I'm going to go in depth into communal socialism, because that's really what for me, the really exciting thing that's going on there that I'm anxious to convey to people. And then going forward from here. So population is at about 30.5 million. Venezuela consists of 23 states. It's the fourth largest country in Latin America in land area. It's a presidential republic with the three branches of government. It was colonized by Spain in 1522 and gained independence from Spain in 1811. The ethnic composition is just over half Moreno, and Moreno is a mix of white, mestizo, Afro, it's all over the place. And then you've got 43% white, and then Africa and Venezuela and other. Some more facts. This is amazing to me. Venezuela is the most urban country in the world, with 88.5% of its population living in the cities. As of 2017, 80% of the land was owned by 5% of the population. Oil revenue bonanza led people to move to the cities, and they have lost their agricultural roots, and we can get more into this later if you like. It's a problem, and they're working on it. As a result, Venezuela imports 72% of its food, making food security vulnerable to sanctions, and you've probably heard about, the lack of nutrition and so forth there during the worst years of the sanctions. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the sanctions. This is the number of countries in the world that are under some form of sanction by the U.S. government. And so we're not just talking about Cuba and Venezuela. We're talking about 30 countries around the world with various forms of sanctions going on. Most people have no idea about this. And I can make some of this information available to you later if you want to go more in depth. I know it's hard to see the legend and what is which there, but you see Venezuela, of course. So what are sanctions? So they're political, not legal instruments. Their goal is to cause pain and suffering in order to force populations to overthrow their own governments and surrender their sovereignty. According to legal experts, U.S. sanctions violate the UN Charter, the Charter of the OAS, and the Geneva and Hague Conventions, to which the United States is a signatory. So sanctions on Venezuela, why? Okay, well, first and foremost, Venezuela has the largest crude oil reserves in the world at 304 billion barrels. And Venezuela is practicing one of the most vibrant new forms of socialism in the world today, affording a real possibility of usurping neoliberal democracy. So it's a real threat to the United States. There's more than 950 sanctions by the United States and subservient Western powers. Between 2013 and 2016, Venezuela's GDP declined 24.7%. Between 2014 and 2020, the GDP went from 56 billion to 700 million. You think about that. That's just calamitous. And, obviously it cascaded through the whole country in many forms. Speaking of many forms, this is a smattering of all the forms that the blockade takes, the various measures and the consequences of those measures on the people. in all these different sectors. And I'm not going to read all these. And again, I can make this information available to you later if you're interested in learning more about it. But you can see, you know, it does individuals as well as entire sectors. It had a huge impact on COVID, you know, their ability to respond to COVID, and on and on. It's just been a nightmare for the country in so many ways. Seized assets, you probably heard about the gold bullion that has been withheld. Again, more. Now, these statistics, you can see the sources down at the bottom here, but I'll just give you a moment to look at these. So, it's a lot of harm. Again, the sanctions very much affected, and also the world oil supply, you know, price per barrel fluctuations. As I mentioned, you know, earlier in the Bolivarian Revolution, there was an oil bonanza. You know, oil was high per barrel, and they just had a lot of revenue. And then the situation just completely reversed, as you can see by this chart. And so then you had the sanctions and the price inflation combined with the precipitous drop in the revenue stream from the oil, again, creating just a very, very difficult situation for Venezuela. Here you can see the succession of sanctions. So they started out as early as 2009, and then you can see under Trump, they took a big, big boost. And they're still in place. Biden hasn't changed anything except for recently, and I'll touch on it later. There's been some change most recently. But Trump really amped them up. As I mentioned, the sanctions include on certain named individuals, and here are two of them. Obviously, the current president, Nicolas Maduro, has a $15 million bounty on his head, and then the former vice president under Hugo Chavez, when he was president, has a $10 million bounty on his head. And lest we forget, you know, he who points fingers, right? I like to remind people of the reality of the hypocrisy of our government. I don't know if any of you have heard about this case. This is quite a famous case. It's essentially a Venezuelan businessman who was working to obtain food and medicine during the worst impacts from the sanctions. Anyway, he was kidnapped when the plane stopped for fueling in Cape Verde. Cape Verde is a little island off the coast of Africa, I believe. So they kidnapped him. He's being held in indefinite detention, and you know, all these laws and treaties are violated. When I was there, we actually visited his wife, and that was a very moving experience.
Who were they? They? Who kidnapped?
Oh, U.S. government. I mean, the authorities, the law enforcement authorities of Cape Verde on behalf of the U.S. government. Yeah. Okay, elections and coup d'etat. So, in 1992 was the first effort by Hugo Chavez and some of his, he was in the military then, some of his officers trying to remove the current president who had accepted IMF and all of these other things, and the poverty level and things like that were very, very extreme. Anyway, it was an unsuccessful coup. But then he was elected in 1999 to the presidency, and then was re-elected for successive terms until he died from cancer in 2013. Now in 2002 there was a coup by the far right with the aid and assistance of the U.S. government. And what was so amazing, they, you know, I could go into it in great depth. It's worthy of study. They actually pre-staged videos with generals talking. I mean, they had everything staged before they pulled the trigger. And he was flown to an island off the coast of Venezuela and held for 2 days, and the people revolted en masse in the streets, and they brought him back. I mean, they literally flipped the coup. It was an amazing phenomenon. And then, of course, the current president was elected right after Hugo Chavez died of cancer. And then you may have heard about this character. He is the opposition leader and president of the National Assembly, Juan Guaido. He proclaimed himself president, declared Nicolas Maduro to be illegitimate. The US and Western governments recognized Guaido as the legitimate president. In 2021, Guaido lost leadership of the National Assembly, and then the EU withdrew its presidential recognition of him, and he's just kind of faded into the sunset. And that's a whole other conversation, but anyway. And you know, Trump recognized him, and Mark Rubio and all these other characters. Okay, so Kevin Zeese. Our brigade was named after this gentleman. He was quite an activist. He even ran for the Senate once. These pictures on the right are of the Venezuelan embassy in DC, which you may have heard about. When Guaido was, recognized as president, they emptied out the embassy. They tried to put Guaido's people in. Anyway, it ended up in a big brouhaha that dragged out for months. But three or four of our brigade members were part of the people that held the embassy. It was really remarkable. And in the middle picture, the second person, the woman from the right, is a professor of mine at the California Institute of Integral Studies in the School of Anthropology. And she was one of the organizers of this trip to Venezuela. And so she was with us. And then the fellow on the left there is Paul, I forget his last name. He runs Task Force of the Americas out of Marin County. Anyway, and then you see Kevin Zeese in all three of these pictures. So anyway, co-sponsored by Code Peak and Code Peak Task Force of the Americas. Our trip dates were the first 2 weeks of August. There were 15 of us. And like I said, some of the people were involved in the Venezuelan embassy holding. So just some snapshots. Upper left-hand corner, we visited a rural commune, and they had a sugarcane press, and this is a sugarcane press in action. They're feeding the sugarcane stalks into it to crush it and get out the molasses or the syrup. The upper right, that is Hugo Chavez's gravesite. It's a memorial site in a dedicated building on a mountaintop, and there's an honor guard there, and they shoot a cannon off every day. Anyway, all of that, and we visited visited Hugo Chavez's gravesite. Those are three members of our brigade in the lower left, and then there's my professor again from CIIS giving a talk. Okay, there were several things that struck me in Venezuela, not the least of which was the level of political literacy of the average person in the street was remarkable. And it's due to the education, which of course the US government would call brainwashing, propaganda, what have you. But the level of education, political education that goes on in the country is phenomenal. Now you may recognize that gentleman because his picture was on the criminal wanted. This is the former vice president of Venezuela. His name is Diosdado Cabello. And he has this, I don't know if it's weekly, I think it's a weekly TV show, and it's about politics and political literacy. And he is the head of the Socialista Unido de Venezuela, which is the political party that's currently in power, that Maduro and Chavez and so on. Anyway, I wanted to share, the second night we were there in Venezuela, people said, guess what, you're going downtown to a TV studio and you're going to be part of a live audience at this show. So we pile into this bus, go downtown, and we go up these stairs, and there's people with submachine guns everywhere. And I think, what the hell is this? There's a TV show, and there's people with submachine guns. Well, it's because he's got a $10 million bounty on his head. Anyway, it's like a pep rally, But then, the peppiness stops, and he has a discourse, and he's talking about the opposition and what's happening in the country. An incredible level of very current, up-to-date political information, that is being dispensed. Anyway, it was really quite remarkable, very powerful and obviously very influential on the people. And I think that's another reason why he's got $10 million on his head, because he's an incredible celebrity. Not only is he a former, he's also head of the PSUV, the political party that's currently in power. So he heads that up, former vice president, and then he's got this TV show. So that was on our second day there. Just drop, oops, let me go forward here. Okay, all right, so a rentier state, again, the oil. A rentier state is a term used to characterize a country whose government derives a significant portion of its revenue from external sources. In this case, selling oil on the international market, often in the form of rents or royalties, rather than from taxes on the domestic economic activity. In the case of Venezuela, the country's economy has historically been heavily dependent on revenues from its vast oil reserves, which it exports to international markets. Again, this was really interesting, and I'm going to get more into this. But you don't find the separation there that we do here in terms of the compartmentalization within life. And so, political and civil society are inseparable. So political engagement is an everyday common experience for the average Venezuelan. Political literacy is high. Political parties are vibrant, fueled by constituency, and voting is widespread. Now you compare that to the United States. U.S. Republican and Democratic parties are private entities, exclusive, unaccountable. Political illiteracy to maintain unquestioning compliance is fostered. Political parties and elections are mere shows produced by the ruling elites. Farcical, performative, voter apathy is widespread. So that really struck me, comparing and contrasting our two countries in terms of politics, electoral systems, and involvement. Okay, so now we're going to dive into communal socialism. In order to do that effectively, I want to share some terminology with you which you may not be familiar with. And I'm going to define and go through each one of these. But so first we have communal councils, then we have communes, then we have something called social labor, we have protagonistic and participatory democracy, we have free association of producers, and direct social property. Now some of these terms are Marxist, so those of you that have some Marxist background might know things like free association of producers. You've undoubtedly heard that before. Okay, so what's the history of communal socialism? So Karl Marx, towards the end of his life, got really, really interested in communalism. So after he finished Capital, everybody assumed he would be writing, volume 2 or whatever. Well, actually, he started reading all this other stuff, and not the least of which was he was really interested in communes, both in Russia and in China and in India. And so then there's this Hungarian Marxist named István Mészáros, who comes along later, and he's a Marxist scholar, and he proposes an alternative to the Soviet-style hierarchical, anti-democratic, surplus labor extracting, false and insufficient socialism. These are terms that he used. And it's called communal socialism. So Hugo Chavez, and again, it's another story I can't get into, we don't have the time. Hugo Chavez was introduced to this gentleman's ideology, and he was terribly impressed. And so it led to Chavez eventually meeting him and starting to work with academics and other people to put together legislation that was then adopted. And most famously, the Law of Communes and Popular Power. Those laws were passed in 2010. Okay, communal councils. The communal council is the assembly of all the people of a self-chosen territory that decides on all matters. In urban areas, it comprises 150 to 200 families or living units. In rural areas, 20 to 30 families or living units. And indigenous areas that are even less densely populated, 10 to 20 families or living units. There are 45,000 communal councils in Venezuela. More on communal councils. They form work groups as needed, based on needs. Again, the free association of producers. Examples: infrastructure, water, sports, culture. Work groups bring proposals to the communal council for consideration. Projects are financed through public institutions that are regional or federal, bypassing existing local representative institutions that are oftentimes hostile to the people. Power of direct democracy practiced by communal councils. You have an interesting situation in Bolivia because unlike some revolutions, they didn't go in and just throw everything away that was already existent. So in other words, capitalism, city councils, mayors, that kind of thing. So those things were left. However, in parallel, they started communal socialism. And so they're kind of two parallel systems. It's very interesting. But, the ultimate idea, and I'm going to get more into it, the ultimate idea is that communal socialism will win out and make the state as we know it obsolete. It's a fascinating concept, to me anyway. Okay, communes. A commune is formed when multiple communal councils combine. Communes can be either rural or urban. They include meeting spaces, residences, workplaces, and they practice new forms of social relations, such as protagonistic and participatory democracy, free association of producers. They enable direct social labor and social property, and communes are the building block of socialism in Venezuela. Social labor. Social labor activities are actions undertaken in pursuit of community-determined objectives and using community-approved methods. Examples of social labor include caregiving and domestic work, which are performed with the aid of assisting and nurturing individuals rather than for monetary gain or trade. This stands in contrast to individual, isolated labor conducted to produce goods for exchange within an impersonal market, which is commonly referred to as wage labor. In wage labor, individuals sustain their livelihood by engaging in work as a commodity to generate surplus value for the owner of the means of production. In this context, neither the produced goods nor the working conditions are owned by the laborer. Well, this is revolution. An exciting one. What is direct social labor? Okay, labor that is not mediated by the market, but by conscious and collective decision making. It abolishes the commodity form and all the relations that derive from it, and it's practiced by free association of producers. So you see, this is a completely different paradigm we're talking about here. So the old socialism is antiquated and going out the door, and this is the new one from the bottom up. Okay, so what is protagonistic and participatory democracy? So the Bolivarian Revolution in Venezuela emphasizes popular power or people power. The Constitutional Assembly in 1999 was a massive direct countrywide participation of thousands of Venezuelans to basically give input to the Constitution. Protagonist, just to remind you, is an important supporter of an idea or political system. Everyone can be a protagonist in this system. Participatory democracy praxis is, in other words, a direct democracy in practice. The commune is the ultimate expression of popular power and substantive democracy. Hugo Chavez once referred to elections as festivals of political machinery, even though he knew how to win them. Okay, free association of producers, definition. In a state of affairs characterized by the absence of government, social class, hierarchy, or private ownership of the means of production, individuals engage in relationships. When private property, which should be distinguished from personal property, is eliminated, people regain unrestricted access to the means of production. Consequently, they can freely come together without societal restrictions to create and sustain their living conditions and to fulfill their individual and creative aspirations and desires. Features of the freely associated producers in a commune. So, no bosses, restores labor conditions and instruments to the producers who will decide how to use and control them. It de-alienates the producer's labor. It liberates the undervalued, often coerced work of social reproduction by making it shared and collective. Production of use values is for communal consumption and well-being, not capital consumption. So more about the freely associated producers. Activities are not determined by economic forces or the law of value, nor are they controlled by some external agency, either patriarchal or paternalistic, or an externally imposed production plan that brings about the end of the commodity form, wages, and alienated proletarian labor in general. Social property. Social property refers to a form of ownership in which the control, use, and benefits of certain assets, resources, or means of production are held collectively or socially, rather than privately by individuals or specific entities. In social property systems, the ownership and management of these resources are typically vested in the broader community, society, or a collective group, rather than in private individuals or corporations. They're different than cooperatives, which maintain the logic of private property. In other words, while having many owners, the cooperative does not serve the whole society. It's collective decision-making, deciding what to produce, how, and what to do with surpluses. Two forms of social property. Direct is self-managed by communities, indirect is state-run. So for example, the oil sector is owned by the government, it's nationalized, so that would be indirect. Okay, so, need I remind you, we're in a transition stage here in the world. Okay, so you've undoubtedly heard about BRICS. BRICS now has something on the order of 43 nations that have applied for membership. So this is a counter-hegemony, if you will, to US hegemony, right? Capitalist hegemony. And then you have the new international economic order. I don't know if you know about that, but it started in 1973 and 74, and it was a group of non-aligned nations that wanted to get out from under the thumb of Bretton Woods and the Washington Consensus. And so it's already had its first 50 years, and they're just reconstituting now. They just had a conference in Havana in January, which I attended. And so you'll be hearing more about these folks. Venezuela recently signed 31 agreements with China. So Venezuela's economic meltdown has bottomed, with the economy returning to growth during 2021, seeing gross domestic product expanding by 0.5%, which illustrates that US sanctions have failed. Indeed, in a surprising development, Venezuela's economy grew by an impressive 8% during 2022, which was the third best performance in South America. And the IMF is predicting GDP will expand by 5% for 2023, the second highest forecast on the continent. So unless you know where to dig for this information, you would never know it. The information stream out of Washington, of course, is that Venezuela's a failed state, everyone's starving, everyone's leaving, yada, yada. That's simply not true. It's just lies. People are repatriating back to Venezuela now because the economy is coming back. This just happened like 2 weeks ago. So with the chaos in the Middle East and the threat to the oil supply, the US government has temporarily suspended some sanctions against their petroleum sector. So situational ethics. That just happened. So this is good news for Venezuela because it would allow some revenue, more revenue stream. Okay, so we're done. Questions? Yeah. Yes.
Do you suppose that the ex-vice president is going to run for another office? President?
The current president?
No, the ex-vice president, the one with the 10 million
Oh, Juan Guaido.
bounty.
You mean the head of the assembly, Juan Guaido?
No. The ex-vice president, well, the vice president that served under Hugo.
Oh, Diosdado Cabello.
Yeah,
No, I'm not aware of whether he is or not.
because of his bounty, right?
Well, Nicolas Maduro has a bounty too.
Oh, that's
And I don't think there's term limits for the presidency in Venezuela. So I'm imagining Nicolas Maduro, he's already been in office for 2 terms. But there is a vibrant opposition. And in fact, there's been times when the opposition has had control of the National Assembly. So, other questions? Yes?
I got confused by 5% of the property is owned by,
Yes.
the majority of the property is owned by 5, but it's a social, so that's had me all the time. I'm wondering how that works.
Yes.
And I have a question about Maduro. I feel like if our government doesn't like him, he's a good guy. So is he kind of sketchy here and there, or is he in the following in the footsteps of Chavez?
Well, of course, anybody to be in the shadow of Chavez is a hard act to follow, and of course that was a huge problem for him, if you will. But he was vice president under Hugo Chavez, don't forget. But let me answer your first question. See, this is what's interesting, and this particular revolution. You know, the new leadership, Hugo Chavez and company, did not like take all the land from the private landowners and do a massive redistribution. Okay, they just simply did not do that, and that's why you see the statistic you did, that 80% of the land is still held by 5% of the people. How is that possible after a revolution? But that's what they chose to do. But what they have done, and there's not enough time to get into it in this, but they actually have, in some of the legislation that has been adopted and institutionalized, they actually allow people to collectively go in and seize unused land and property. And then they can seek title to it from the government and get title to it and live in it and work it. And that has happened quite a bit, especially in rural areas, for people to farm.
So there is what would be the equivalent of BLM land here available?
No, well, there would be state properties, but I'm in this case referring to private landowners, what they're called latifundas, I think, large agricultural properties that are not in production. And in fact, Bolivia even has something like this on the books. If the land is not in production and local people want to go in and start working the land, they can, and they can eventually get claim to it, get title to it, and we visited people in the countryside and in the cities. So in the cities, they've gotten buildings, and in the countryside, they've gotten farmland.
But this is not like they're squatting on somebody else's.
No, it's not a squatter
Okay.
situation.
So
no.
it's land that's there.
Yeah.
It's within the borders, but nobody owns it, and it's not government BLM land, Bureau of Land Management or equivalent to that. It's just there.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Costa Rica has something similar to that. If there are buildings or a farm that hasn't been used for years, people can go in and take possession of it, not get it titled over to them, but essentially assigned to them legally.
Right.
It's a problem.
That's so strange.
Are you talking about Venezuela?
Me? No, I was talking about Costa Rica. I'm familiar with that.
There's the same thing in Nicaragua.
Is it?
Yeah, same thing, took the land from people, if it wasn't used, kind of revolution.
Yeah.
Came in and then they just took the land and dispersed it to other people.
More questions?
Yeah, how are decisions made in these communes? A lot of people, because it was, communes were multiple other entities that were even a lot of people. How are decisions made?
Yeah, I really don't have the specifics on that. I mean, they certainly encourage everyone's participation. And now, the means and methods by which they may choose to, give someone their representation. I did hear of subgroups, being formed, because yes, obviously, there would be situations where decisions would need to be made, where if the commune has, thousands of members, you would never be able to get everybody in the room to even. So I don't have a good answer for you, but in fact, if I had more time, I wanted to participate in some of those sessions, just to actually see the methods. Are they using consensus? And I was thinking about, I asked several people, have you heard of sociocracy? Nobody knew anything about it. I thought, oh wow, I got something for you. Anyway, I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, it was an answer. Thank you. I have another question. Is that okay? I can't imagine how this worked where they left all the systems that were already in place that sounds like they were sort of similar to what our systems are, capitalism and anyway, I don't remember your whole list, but it was like, so they left those all in place and they just built this other society. So now I see about the land, that if there was empty spaces that weren't owned by anybody, that was one way, but how did the people, the new...
Yes.
What did that look like?
Yes, okay. I can give you several examples. We visited one commune in an urban center called Barcelona, and they had taken over an abandoned factory that produced plastic wood for children's playgrounds. And not only did they have the building, but all the production equipment was left, abandoned. And so they got title to the whole thing and they brought it back into production. So you'll have situations like that. And then of course, again, you'd have farms, and there's a Ministry of Communes, and there is funding available. Of course, as you can imagine, with sanctions and the oil market and everything, the funding hasn't been that much, and it's been in fits and starts. But we visited one commune that was able to, the state was able to buy them a tractor in order for them to move forward with their agricultural production, okay? And so, they look to that fund, but there's other means, that they might exercise to have access to the means of production. But, we saw, like in the sugarcane plantation, people were using machetes by hand to harvest the sugarcane. I mean, it is backbreaking work. Why? Because they just simply don't have the modern harvesting equipment, because they don't have the money or access to that. And that situation hopefully will change in time. But, people are committed and they do what it takes, even if it's, old school, pre-technology, hard labor. Yeah.
This is uplifting to myself to hear that the revolution is continuing, going well. Am I picking this up okay?
Yes.
The spirit of the people is good, and socialism is not a joke. The joke is on us. Because I haven't quite had the ammo in a quick shot when somebody says, oh yeah, you want to try socialism. So can you leave us, or are there some materials where I can say, check this out?
Yes.
Yeah,
if you give me your
BS,
contact.
go here.
Yeah, give me your contact information. There's absolutely, and that's one of the big take-homes, and that's what I found so exciting, because, obviously you have the Soviet failed state, if you will, and so you have people pointing to examples of failed socialism, and of course that Hungarian philosopher recognized it very well, and he diagnosed and troubleshooted it and came up with a lot of hard work with this system. And it's in practice, it's still experimental, but it is in play, and it has, I think, enormous promise, because it's bottom-up socialism, and it's changing human relations, across the board. So yes, you give me your contact information, I can get you some more resources.
So, inasmuch as there are no bosses, do we have a setup where there are, do things rotate? Is everything consensus? I mean, you know, how does a group of 30 start and then,
Well, that kind of goes to Linda's question. I really can't answer that specifically because I didn't have the time or luxury of actually getting into that, decision-making space. I want to go back, and I do want to see what's in practice because I have the same curiosity. Are they using consensus? What are they doing? We know it's direct democracy, it's participatory. What methods or forms is it taking?
I read a little bit about that method and, well, two things. Do you believe that Cuba is also on the same track?
I'm sorry?
Do you believe that Cuba is also on the same track as this social democracy, this whole social?
That's a really good question, and I don't have an answer for you. The only thing I can draw a parallel to is the communal councils.
Yeah, right.
Because, I think they share that in common very much, but beyond that, I'm sorry, I don't know.
And I also heard that, or also think I read, that how they come to a decision in these large groupings is they choose representatives that are then on like a panel that present whatever the issues are to wherever it matters. But that seems like they could still be consensual.
Christian,
Yes?
I was considering passing this out with name and contact. And
Yes.
just with links or anything.
Yes.
You can send links.
Yeah, by all means,
Great.
please. Yes?
Whatever happened to the opposition, and the guy that was made president?
Yeah, they're alive and well, I can assure you. They, I haven't spent a lot of time, trying to dissect and understand the current status of the opposition, but from what I understand, it's a little bit like our Republican Party. It's kind of in disarray, and of course, as a result of that disarray, it's rather weak. And the whole Juan Guaido affair, I think, was a huge blow to them. And, given the fact that Venezuela is slowly coming back from the worst of the sanctions, which were, I think, in the years 2015, 2016, their economy is starting to pick up. They're making more agreements with other states like China and Iran and so forth. So they are digging themselves out of the hole. People are repatriating themselves. There's flights regularly from the United States of Venezuelans returning home to resume life in their homeland. So the situation is improving, albeit slowly.
Do you have any idea of what level of, what type of people, what economic level had left? Are those the
No.
5% that own the land?
Actually, some of those people, well, like that one factory, I think the factory owner, left and went to Miami and said, screw this. No, you had people do that. I mean, they just said, I'm out of here. I've got enough money to live comfortably in the U.S. Goodbye.
it's like the Cubans.
Whatever. And but the Bolivarian Revolution is still underway, and I don't think those capitalists will be returning anytime soon. But the brain drain that you would expect is probably starting to return, and that's good for Venezuela, obviously. Susan,
Do you think, there's been talk in the United States.
speak up, I'm sorry.
There's been talk in the United States, not at the government level, but of people buying up the companies that they work for, and the obstacle obviously is money. And the suggestion is that if the government can finance, give money to corporations all the time, they do it all the time in different industries, they could do that, they could give money to workers to buy their companies.
Yes, that is already happening,
Yeah.
and hopefully we'll see more of that.
But with government financing?
Yes,
Oh, it is? Oh,
yes,
okay.
yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think in the case of that particular tractor, I don't know if that was a gift or a grant or a loan. I heard that there's both.
Well, I'm talking about here in the United States.
Oh, yes,
I'm
okay,
talking about the United States.
Sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I'm talking,
right.
we got subsidies here. And so subsidize workers buying their
Right.
buying the companies that they
Right,
work for.
right.
I've heard neighbors say that
Mhm.
there's
Yeah.
some place where, if you wanna start a
And the
collective.
claim exists, yeah.
Yeah, that, which is why it's bothering me about people saying, I hate working for bosses, so start your own company.
Yeah.
You know, get it together. Everybody's gotta go through hoops, whether you got $1 billion or you got 20. But you're still gonna have to go through the same hoops.
Right. Have you been to Mondragon?
I have not, it's on my bucket list.
Oh, okay, all right.
Oh, yes.
Just wondering how it compared,
Yeah, yeah. More questions?
Do you suppose that with some estimates of the coming social collapse because of global warming, that country will suffer more because of their lack of producing their own food?
Absolutely. And that is one of the things that I heard talk about, that the government realizes how vulnerable it is. Because as you all probably know, I mean, climate change impacts can wipe out entire food chain supplies. And when you have globalization and capitalism, as we do, where, food in Ukraine is making its way to Africa, and that's just nonsense. It's not sustainable. So the vulnerability is extreme, they know that. So they have a program underway. Again, I don't know hardly anything about it, but a program underway to get people back onto the land and build up their agricultural sector, because they're sitting ducks right now. It's very bad. They've got, and in fact, the rural commune movement, there's a union of communes there, and they're looking at confederating themselves and basically working together, and they've gone to the government, the federal government, and made a proposal. We would like to take the lead on, will you help us? We will take the lead on building up our agricultural sector and food security in the country. And so I heard about those kinds of initiatives. So they're aware of, at least at some level, aware of their vulnerability and that they need to change it up. Yes?
What originally happened where they went off of the farms and food production went downhill?
Yeah. I don't know a lot about it, but what I heard, I haven't researched the specifics of that. And the problem with Venezuela is there's so little in writing, and I'm not fluent in Spanish anyway, but I have to talk to people there on the ground who would know to get the answers. But my understanding was that when they were flush with money from the oil sales, there was just something about that I think the social programs saw such an increase that people felt like they could just go to this is my interpretation, they could go to the city and party down and leave. The whole the legacy of the shame of working hard labor and going to modernity and all that nonsense of capitalism and modernity. Mm-hmm. So people drank the Kool-Aid. There was a lot of money in the social programs, and they just left the countryside, and very much to their long-term detriment now, and they've got to reverse that situation, just as we do. I mean, we've got to, fortunately here, farming is cool. There's more and more young people that are taking it up, but it's a struggle for them too because of agribusiness. Yes?
Speaking about not hearing much, how are they doing in terms of climate change? I haven't heard that they've had any major floods, fires, hurricanes. Are they sitting kind of like we are? I mean, I feel like we're in a bubble here.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. I did hear that there were some very severe floods in the early 2000s, but I really don't know much about it. I made some inquiries when I was there. Apparently, they're not in the path of the traditional path of hurricanes. They're below that path, so they're not getting clogged. Even though they're not that far away from Cuba and the DR and Haiti, they are apparently spared the wrath of the hurricane seasons for the most part. But make no mistake about it. I mean, every country has and will continue to have climate change impacts of a range, a variety.
Right.
And they need to they need to prepare for that and think about adaptation and mitigation, just like we all do everywhere. No place is free of that hazard. Yes.
Can you speak to the role of women, how that hopefully has changed?
Yes.
Particularly in the communes, in a country where
Yes.
in the culture, machismo has been so interesting.
Yes, no, that's a good question. My impressions were that, you know, feminism is very strong, and that the women are very much in leadership roles, you know, throughout, particularly in the communes. So it's the socialism is bringing that about, is my impressions. Gender equality and sharing leadership positions and that sort of thing. So it's not a very good answer to your question, but again, I'd be happy to point you to some resources that would perhaps answer your question. But that's my impression, is that they're whittling away at the machismo aspect of it all, and that there's more they're pushing for equality. And you know, everywhere I went, and whether dealing with the government or communes, the women were always in positions of leadership everywhere we went. So if that means anything, you know.
So could you give us kind of, and maybe you did this in the first few minutes, I don't know if I can. Your overall view, like, did you see poverty? Did you see people begging? Did you see transactions?
Yeah. I can't really say that I did. You know, I'm sure, you know, we know that the sanctions are bad, and that there's also, and this goes back to one of the earlier questions, there clearly is government mismanagement and corruption. You know, I mean, you find that in so many places in the world. But I didn't really see like tents and people in the streets, you know, like we do here. You know, I do know that inflation is bad, supplies are scarce, including food. Things cost a lot. The standard of living is very difficult. And so people are scraping by. I mean, you can tell they're struggling. There's no question about it. But you know, there is an oligarchy there. There are affluent people that haven't left, that are still there, and they lived in a certain part of Caracas. We didn't go over there. We were there to really tour the socialist communes, so we never made our way over there. It would have been interesting to have some kind of contact to try to get a feel for what that must be like. But you know, I've been to many countries in Latin America, and you find a similar situation. You know, you've got the Beverly Hills going on in a part of the place, and it just seems to be immune from all the poverty and misery or the struggles of the people. But you know, again, capitalism, and you have more of a concentration of wealth there. I mean, there's other countries, you know, if you think 80% of the land owned by 5% of the people is much worse in other countries. Like, what is it, Honduras, there's like 5 families that own 9, I mean, it's just some unbelievable statistic. Like, just a handful of families own like 90% of the land.
Also.
You know, places like that. So, but again, you know, there is a form of land redistribution going on, because the land that's unused can be, you know, I use the word squatted, but it's not just like that. They can actually go in and seize the land and move the fences and go to Caracas and go to the courts and make a filing and get title to the land.
Homestead.
Yes, like a homestead. Yeah, right. Yeah.
Wait, did you go to like commercial center? When I was there, was a vibrant street scene of sellers that spread their blankets out, and it was just a mass of people selling things on the street.
Yeah. Oh yeah. You have a strong informal economy there, and a lot of vendors on the streets. Absolutely. It's no different than, you know, most Latin American countries in that respect, certainly. Anything else?
How was the food?
I'm sorry?
How was the food over there?
How was the food?
Yeah.
Oh, well, we ate very simply. We made a point of being with the people, and and even though we had occasion to meet like the minister of the Ministry of Communes and some high-level officials, you know, we stayed in dormitory conditions. We we actually stayed in the communes, and sometimes we were sleeping on a dirty mattress without even sheets on a concrete floor in a building with no electricity. So, you know, for some situations. So, you know, it wasn't for the weak and faint-hearted, this trip. And the food was very simple, but there was plenty of it, and people were very warm and generous. So we ate a lot of soups. There wasn't a lot of meat. I don't know if I've answered your question, but it was pretty simple. Pretty simple, fair.
Well, you had a mattress, man.
Yeah, we had a mattress. Yeah. Yes,
How did they react to a group coming from this country?
say that again.
How did they react to a group coming from this country, and did they have any messages for you to bring back?
Oh, well, and the sanctions.
Ah,
First and foremost, in fact, I need to do more letter writing about that myself. I've published a couple of articles, but sanctions don't work, and yet they continue to do them. You know, it's just so stupid, and all it does is hurt the people. It never results in the regime change. And Venezuela is a wonderful country, and it at one time apparently was the richest country in Latin America, and it's gone, you know, 180 degrees thanks to the capitalist greed and you know, the hegemony and imperialism. So, you know, it has a lot of natural resources. You know, it faces the Caribbean, so it has the fisheries and so it has a lot going for it. It's even got part of the Andes Mountains in the west of the country, which I'm looking forward to visiting because it's a lot cooler, they say, from the coast.
Go to Canema.
Yeah.
Have you heard of that?
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
And there's a commune above Lake Maracaibo that is called the Che Guevara commune, and they produce coffee and cacao. And I really want to visit it because I actually had both the coffee and the cacao in Venezuela from that commune.
that
So
sounds
it's
like a good trip.
so that is that commune's business, and that's another thing. Just about every commune we visited had some kind of community, collective, owned and operated enterprise doing whatever. In the case of the Che Guevara commune, it was cacao and coffee. There are another rural commune we visited, sugarcane, you know, and they got their sugarcane press, and now they're looking to get additional equipment to then start making rum and other products from the raw sugarcane syrup. Yeah.
Okay, so you're talking about these products, can they trade with the US or can they sell those products in the US?
I don't believe so. I don't believe so. I'm imagining they're probably selling within the region. Again, it gets down to the extent of the sanctions, and you know, every once in a while you'll hear about a country that quote unquote violates a U.S. sanction, and you know, they get a slap on the wrist, a mention in the press, and so on. But what the communes are doing, again, I mentioned this earlier, they're confederating, and they're going to help support and build one another up. So, you know, ideally they would agree to, okay, you produce this, we'll produce that, let's trade and grow together and support our you know, communal socialist economy, as it were. So there is that happening more
What
and more.
about to the other Caribbean islands?
I'm sorry?
Do they export to the Caribbean
I
islands?
think
or-
they do. I think they do have trade with some Caribbean islands, yes. Again, you almost have to go country by country to see if they're touched by the U.S. sanctions or not. You know, the sanctions are complicated.
Do you think that the growth of BRICS will dilute the effect of of US sanctions, that these will be countries that will say,
I certainly
"We're not
hope
taking
so.
part"?
I certainly hope so, because, it gets down to, there's many reasons for the power of US imperialism and hegemony, but, the most popular one that most people think about is the financial networks. The US had, built that out, the world's using it, and the US has control over it, and they can basically flip the switch, and that's a huge problem. And so, I'm one of many things that I'm keeping my eye on is, what does it look like for BRICS or the new international economic order countries to start to build out their own internet, to start to build out their own financial networks. And so to the extent that those networks and services can be built out and they can abandon the US, and then they can be independent of that. And that's part of the multipolar world that we're seeing emerge, instead of the unipolar world that the US is so long accustomed to, calling all the shots. Yes?
Yeah, so what do you know about the oil? Are there large reserves that they can't sell or to get?
Yeah, the oil, I'll tell you what little I know. Because of the sanctions, they have not been able to even do the maintenance on their oil infrastructure, to even produce it and sell it. And so I heard that Iran is helping them with that, in that regard. But now, as I alluded to just 2 weeks ago, the US just cut a deal. And so what I think you're going to see happen is more oil come online, and hopefully with the price, they'll be able to do better than they have been. But I did hear that the infrastructure had severely degraded, and that was a big problem. And again, they have the largest proved reserves in the world. So,
Right.
and then you may have heard Chevron made a special deal with them.
Oh, yeah, right. That's
Yeah,
what I asked.
yeah.
Goodbye environment.
Yeah.
Just out of curiosity.
Yeah.
What was the tour that when you went there, you went with who?
Okay. So it was the brigade was put together by two organizations, Code Pink and the Task Force for the Americas.
Oh, okay.
And there were 15 of us, and it was 2 weeks from August 1st to the 13th. And we got a bus, and that bus stayed with us the whole 2 weeks, took us everywhere. We were in Caracas for the first few days, and then it took us east, a whole day's drive to the far east, to visit a rural commune, the one that's growing sugarcane near the Caribbean coast. And what else can I say about it? And again, we stayed in the communes. We didn't stay in any. When we were in Caracas, we stayed in the dormitories of the leading political education school. That was interesting. So they have a political education school that emergent leaders from around Venezuela can go to and take coursework. That was really interesting. So, and that was a dormitory environment. And they had a community kitchen, and we ate together and so on. But everywhere we went, we lived with the communards. We spent days and nights with them, and we would talk late into the nights. And they had as many questions for us as we did for them. It was just a wonderful exchange. It was just amazing. And they're so warm. And it was so clear to them that we were supporters of them, that we were absolutely against what the US government is doing to their country. And, they could see that we had empathy and compassion and concern for all the hardships that were rippling through their world as a result. And we did bring some supplies for them. For example, we brought some cache of heirloom seeds for the rural commune so that they could grow their own vegetables and seed save. Because again, they can't get their hands on anything, and if they can, it costs a fortune. So for them to buy seed was a real problem. So that was one example. And then we bought things like soccer balls and basketball hoops. That's why I have these boys. I love this picture. These boys climbed up on their hoop to put a new net on their You know, it's just little things like that that they don't have, that they can't get. You know, we brought a whole bunch of medical supplies. So it was really great. So we weren't, you know, we certainly weren't tourists. We were there to learn and to exchange knowledge and information and to bring them some goods, which is very hard to come by, either by cost or scarcity of supply. Yeah.
Well, 80% is urbanized, something like that. The very urban, the population.
88.5% of the population is urbanized.
Are the young people doing this all the time, or are they more?
They don't have the smartphones like we do, not to the extent.
So
No,
that's
but there is
keeping
some
them
of that.
more, alert, interactive, on top of things.
They have, yeah, for the most part.
Well, it sounds like they have real education there.
Yes.
They do?
Yeah, real education as opposed to what we.
Right, that's what I'm looking for,
Yeah.
you know, are they like more, is their education approaching more like what's going on with, you know, no homework, get out, learn how to do the real stuff. I mean, I know literacy
Yeah.
is important and so on, but are they getting more progressive in their thoughts? You know, do they have us with their education too?
Yeah, no, I don't have an answer for you. I would love to learn more about their educational system. I would like to think that as progressive as they appear to be, I mean, I was just surprised. And they knew a lot of what was going on. I started to talk to them about what was going on in Kurdistan and Rojava, you know, with democratic confederalism and all of that. And they said, oh yeah, we're talking to them. We're talking to each other. I thought, right on, this is great. I don't know if any of you know about Rojava and Kurdistan, but anyway, there's an interesting movement there of what's called democratic confederalism. And it was articulated by a gentleman named Abdullah Öcalan, who has been in prison for 27 years. He's kind of the Nelson Mandela of Kurdistan. But they're about the ecological civilization with a very strong emphasis on feminism, by the way. Again, it's hard to get information about what's going on there. And they've had it particularly bad. In Venezuela, it's sanctions and oil price drops, but they're surrounded by wars, including Turkey. I don't know how much you know about Turkey. As you know, Erdogan is just, you know, they would just like to commit genocide and just make the Kurds disappear. They want to assimilate them. So they're being attacked. So they have this amazing grassroots democracy movement going on there. Meanwhile, they're being attacked by ISIS, Daesh, Turkey. I don't know. The list is horrific.
I love the fact that they've got the women armed.
Yes.
Because it's humiliating to be attacked by a woman.
There were battles with ISIS where the women won, and it was so horrible.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. There was a very famous battle in Kobani. Anyway, you can look all this up, and there's videos and everything. But anyway, I was,
There's a documentary.
Yes, that's right. So I was, you know, it's a long answer to your question, but yeah, there are people there that are very much have their finger on the pulse of what's going on in world events and other movements. You know, they know about what's going on in, Zapatismo and in Rojava and what have you. So yeah, it's a pleasure to see that. Yeah.
Too complacent here. Even as it's bad, there's just too much to make you numb.
We're victims of psychological operations.
You know, I watched Network last night. Again, it's been many years, and just I couldn't believe the first 20 minutes. I said, when did Fox News start? This was 77. You know, I mean, this movie, and it's like just.
And that was just the movie.
And that was the movie, yeah. Man, did they nail it.
Anybody else?
You're going back?
Yes. I don't know when yet, but yes. I'm in a PhD program, and I was focusing on localization as a replacement to globalization given climate change impacts. And then I heard about this, and then to come to learn that they've got a localization movement that's, just awesome, and that it has actual resources behind it, and some real powerful thinking that's going to change what needs to be changed in terms of capitalism and social relations, the workplace, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm shifting my focus to look at them very closely. Communal socialism. I think it could be the future for civilization in terms of decision making, or some combination thereof of maybe what's going on with democratic confederalism and what's going on with communal socialism. Those are the places that, in my estimation, hold the greatest possibilities for the change that we need. Because our system is crashing and burning so badly. And the World Economic Forum is scrambling to try to figure out how can we leverage the climate change, but people are saying that nope, this system's run out of gas. You're not going to be able to disaster capitalize on this one. So things are going to be shaken to their roots, in my opinion. And so these are places where they're building an alternative system, which I think holds great promise. Great promise. Yeah. Yes.
So it's the World Economic Forum that's having a meeting in the city, isn't it?
No, that's APEC.
APEC, I got that
Yeah,
wrong.
and by the way, all of you should know about that. We need you all on the streets on the 15th. Look up APEC. What is it? Asia Pacific Economic.
Yes.
Anyway,
American.
it's a big deal. Like,
Israeli.
Modi and Xi Jinping, all these people are flying in, and they're all going to be cutting multilateral deals about which none of us have anything to say about. That will subvert environmental and all. It's just one of these nightmares again. And what we need is a showing like WTO in Seattle.
There's a call out for that.
There is a call out, and I'm here to echo that.
So let's.
I'm going, and we need everybody. Yeah, we do.
Christian, is it in San Francisco?
Yes, it's San
Is it
Francisco.
Civic Center?
Oh, on the 15th? Again, give me your contact information so I can give you accurate information, but you could probably find it online.
Yeah,
I know the big march is on the 15th.
Yeah.
A big march on the 15th, but there's activities all week long, really interesting. People coming in from all over, having alternative summits and think tanks and teach-ins. It's just really an exciting time, and it's happening right here in our backyard. Okay, well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.